Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I've been following you for like years now. I don't remember how I first stumbled across your art, but I'm really excited to connect with you. I see that we're in your art studio, I'm assuming.
You you are. We are.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I've seen photos of this before, so it's exciting to see it virtually in person, live time.
Thanks. Yeah, it's chaotic right now, but I mean, I think that's the beauty of a studio. That's
Absolutely.
it's your like chaotic, organized mess that gives you like the space to make.
100%. Yeah, I'm in the process of I'm not in my studio right now. I'm in my house. I'm usually in my studio. I'm about to remodel my studio and it has like low ceilings, but I think the way that your ceiling is set up, like I want to do something like that with like opening it
It's
up.
really nice. It's really practical. Eventually, I'm going to put skylights in that hopefully can let some air out because in the summer it gets really hot in here. But it gives like height and space and it feels less confined. It's the first time I've actually had a proper studio. Before I was working in like really small spaces. And so
Yeah.
it gives like height allows you to breathe a little bit in a way that I didn't truly appreciate until I had this space.
Is this space connected with like your home or what's the story on your studio?
Yeah, it's I think originally a garage that the
Okay.
person that lived here before turned into her woodworking studio. So it was already kind of set up. I didn't have to do much. Like this island here that you can see a section of was her like woodworking thing that she just like, do you want it? You can have it. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Leave whatever you don't want.
That's
So
so
it was
nice.
great.
I didn't even do an introduction because I just got distracted by your name and the art studio. So, Vela, welcome to Studio Sundays.
Thank you so much.
Yes, happy to have you here. Okay, so we already established we're in your art studio right now, and you live
Yes.
in California, that's correct?
Yes. I live in Los Angeles.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so you've
Not
got
far from the beach.
nice. You've got that's a big space for being in Los Angeles too. That's nice. I always picture like if I was
Yes.
ever to like move down to LA and like do art, I picture this like tiny little room, and that stresses me out.
Yeah, originally it was a tiny little room. I
Hmm.
lived in a bungalow, like a little section of it, which I dedicated to making art. And literally my paintings, I would have like an inch on either side within the space to move. And it was like playing like Jenga in the space to make. And it was wonderful because I could walk to the beach. I could see the ocean from where I was living, but it wasn't conducive to a long-term solution for my art making. And so we pushed back and now I'm, 15 minutes from the beach, which is lovely. But I think LA is one of those places that has a space for every kind of person and
Hmm.
every kind of background. You just have to find it.
Yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
head down there one of these winters, but I know you guys have been getting a lot of flooding and stuff this winter. At least that's what the news says, right?
Yeah, it's been nuts. It's
Yeah.
been crazy. Yeah.
You're like, this is supposed to be sunny California.
I know. I moved. I'm originally from San Francisco, so I knew like colder weather, colder climate. And so when I moved down to LA, I had this full aha moment. I'm like, California can be like this, it's wild. I was like, it's not just the movies. It's
Yeah.
actually nice. So having
Yeah.
like cold winters, I'm kind of used to it, but
Yeah.
it's
So you
fine.
went to California College of the Arts. Um is that in LA or is that somewhere else?
That's also in San Francisco and
Okay.
in Oakland. Yeah, I studied illustration there. I originally was very hesitant to go to art school. I didn't really want to be an artist. Um, I wanted to go in the natural science route and find a liberal arts college where I had an art and science program there that I could study. And my folks actually were the ones who were like, you've been making your whole life, you're probably going to end up in art school and you're probably going to be an illustration major. And I was like, no, 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 you can't tell me what to do. And ultimately, 100% that's the route that I went.
Wow. Usually it's the
Yeah, it was very
opposite.
funny.
Usually the
I
parents are like, you
know.
can't be an artist. That's impossible. And your parents are
I
like,
know.
go.
They're like, you got this. And I was like, yeah, but that's not logical. So yeah, it was funny. And even through like, I had this amazing professor who became kind of a mentor to me. And I'd always tell him, I'd be like, Robert, I am not going to be an illustrator. Like, just letting you know I'm doing this program because I like the coursework. not necessarily because I'm going to do this. I was still, even in school, had this wall up to making in some
Mm.
ways. But I just kept on falling back. I think like fate's interesting that way.
Yeah, why do you
So
think you had the wall up, to begin with?
I don't know. I knew I wanted to be somewhat creative, but I also just loved nature and science, and I thought there wasn't a world where I could combine the two. And I felt like if I was going to pursue a path, it made more sense to pursue something where I could be proactive in the world as opposed to like standing still in my own space. And so, and I felt like making art is such a luxury. And why, I don't know, it's a weird psyche with that. And it's
Mhm,
really difficult. And I knew it would be an uphill battle. I don't
mhm.
know if I was ready for that kind of commitment. Um, yeah, so it was like it was an organic evolution that led me to where I am today, but I think I was my own kind of, I had to get over my own like barriers before I accepted that this is actually a viable path.
And it seems like you've done a really good job at figuring out how to meld your interests with nature and science, with your art, because here you are painting these like flowers and plants that are threatened or gonna potentially going to go extinct, and so you've been able to almost arguably have like a louder voice and like broadcast kind of issues we're facing on the planet, through your art than like maybe going the environmental route and like working at a nonprofit or something and like fighting the system in that uphill battle too. It's all nuance. But I too went to school for environmental studies slash science, so I was very like of that, like I want to save the planet. Like I never even considered being an artist at all. So that's really interesting that you've been able to find the two. When you started doing art in college, were you kind of focused on the subject matter that you are now, or did that come later?
I mean, the coursework was very much like op-ed focused, or you would have like a problem that you'd have to solve through visual interpretation. And then it really all came together, or I guess the beginning of my journey and what sparked my interest was my thesis. We had to do 10 paintings on a subject of choice that had, you could choose whatever you wanted. And a classic example would be like your visual interpretation of, let's say, a classic children's book, right? And then you had to do all kinds of, a thesis statement alongside the work. And I happened to be, I think, like in a, I don't know, CVS or something. And I just had this frustration. Like, there's all these little white bottles on this wall solving everyone's problems. But the reality, it's just like band-aids. And we don't really know what we're taking. And surely all this Western medicine stems from nature in some capacity. And wouldn't it be lovely to know like where Aspen originated from, or Tylenol, and all this? Like I'm so glad we have both East and Western medicine. I'm not one way or the other, but I was just kind of like, let's go back to the roots. I'm just curious about it.
Mm,
And that's how I began. Like I approached my professor and I was like, I'd like to do almost like a thesis, more science driven, like work based and also paper on what helps to heal our ailments in nature. So I did works on diabetes, I did paintings on cancer, on headache, on depression, on pain. And I just did tons of research. What in nature helps heal those, or like where does type 2 diabetes originate from, and so on. And is there experimental studies going on using venom as opposed to opioids for pain management, that it has less addictive properties. And from that, I created this like almost botanical illustration pieces that highlighted the different things in nature that can help heal whatever the problem was. And that was kind of, it got me really excited. It really melded my passions, which was this itch to scratch in the natural science world, as well as the visual interpretations of what that looked like. And at the time, of course, I was just doing thesis, and then I had a task, da, da, da. I had no idea that it would go beyond whatever the end of school project was. but it very much is something that I always then came back to and revisited. Yeah, and so I think that was the beginning that sparked where I am today.
Hmm.
And I did like freelance work for a year. I wasn't super happy, and then eventually I became a mural assistant. I fell into that, and I got to experience the world and practice like large scale painting. And through that, I was also working in the background on my own work. And so organically, I just had this body of work that then I started showing and so on. And it just kind of unraveled from that point.
That's really cool. So it was just that was kind of the moment when you were able to connect both interests and be like, oh, this is actually, I can connect both of my passions. And maybe that fills you up in a way that one or the other wouldn't without having both together, working
Yeah,
together.
exactly. I think I realize now there really is a place for environmental discussion within the art world. I never wanted to be like really like, oh no, doom and gloom around the environment. Like very much the species that I'm painting, some are very much extinct, some are dying out, and then some are really thriving. And so I really also wanted to celebrate the resilience of both the nature that is with us today and the plant species and animal species that are slowly dwindling, but yet
Mhm.
still blooming every year, are still thriving and still surviving. So it is a celebration of nature in every stage. And I think my body of work is not, I I would like the viewer to interpret and have their emotions on whatever the piece is first and foremost. And if they're interested, they can dive into how I created the work in itself. But I
Mhm.
think I wanted this balance of allowing the piece to speak to one's person first before learning like, hey, these species are all extinct or going endangered or just happily thriving in the neighborhood.
That's the interesting part about it because if you just look at it from the outside, you wouldn't know that like some of those that was like the mission behind it, or like that was like it's just beautiful to look at, and like
Thank you.
from a collector perspective, I would imagine, or just a viewer, it's like they could just want it, not even knowing that that's the story behind it. But then when you do go into the story, it's got all of these layers and deep meaning, and that's just a really cool way of getting your message across. So I appreciate what you do in that respect.
Thank you.
You could be just painting like dead things, but that would not be as pretty.
I mean, I went through a phase where I was painting dead things, but I was like,
Yeah, just like a
that's
little
more
bit of a
niche,
dark. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. That's got like its spot and maybe not like something that someone would like want to buy a print of or something like that.
Right.
I read in your bio that you don't always plan your pieces, but it's more based on like research and evidence, or facts. What's your artistic process like in terms of, so if you're not planning it, are you still using like reference imagery, or because it's very lifelike and but almost like more drastically colorful than maybe like it would be in nature, but yeah, how does your process work?
So I will usually have, sorry, police coming through. My process is kind of a very organic way of collecting information. It's whatever speaks to me. So if I, let's say, do a piece on endangered species of, let's say, Europe as a whole, obviously I'm not there on the ground. And most likely the species that I'm highlighting are ones that I will never see in my lifetime. So I will use like the internet and book sources to find references to species that I'm interested in highlighting. And then I will have kind of like almost a library of information that I can pull from, but the composition is just super organic. I usually will paint the background and then take charcoal and just kind of do figurative movements and see if I can find a beginning point that feels right. And the piece is never really honestly never mapped out. And I just kind of go from there and I'm like, okay, I start with one subject and then layer and layer and layer and see where it takes me. And it allows me, maybe it's not the most time efficient thing. I'm a very slow painter, but it allows me kind of to discover and see where the painting takes me almost. Like I might just be the tool, but I don't really have a visual of how it will end up looking. And that's a really fun surprise for me where I step back. I'm like, oh, this is how this ended.
Mm.
And it allows for also happy accents, which I think is a really playful way to paint and make, you know.
Yeah. Well,
But
and
yeah,
it kind of mirrors what nature does. Like nature doesn't have a plan of where all the plants are going to grow, but then all of a sudden there they are. So it's almost like that natural organic process of what you're doing is like mirroring that.
yeah, I think there's truth in that. And I also, I mean, my work is it's really important that all the species, whether they live nearby or not, they have almost like a woven feeling towards them, just to highlight the connectivity that we have with nature. And so, yeah, I think it's been an interesting form and evolution to get to this place. But I think like I start my career started with lots of animalia, like lots of animals and the reptiles and things I was painting, and has gone into this evolution of flora. And I felt like because plants don't have like an audible voice for us, or maybe eyes and nose and these elements that we inherently gravitate towards within the animal kingdom, it's almost like more important, or I felt like more of a mission to highlight them because um, they in different ways don't have certain connections that are more human for us to kind of feel, if that makes sense. That was
I
just the
love
way that
you speak
organized.
for the trees. You speak for the
Yeah,
flowers. That's
I
amazing.
try to.
Yeah. So you're kind of weaving in like environmental activism to your art as you're going along. Do you when you're creating a collection, do you know that you're already going to have a show booked for it, or how are you going about creating different like sections or collections of your work?
So often I'll have a show coming or several that I'm aiming towards to make a body of work for. So last year I had 3 shows that I was making a body of work for, and you know it varied in the amount of paintings, but I obviously wanted it to be like a cohesive language and view and feel like they went together. This year, for example, I'm making a body of work for 2025. So I don't know exactly where they're going to end up, but I know that they will be in probably a show and also maybe a art fair and so on. But I'm making them to be a cohesive like set of paintings.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's like I'm making work that I know is going to exist in a certain space and I can keep that in mind. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm making this for a future space, but they just need to be connected in some capacity. And then,
Mhm.
of course, when it's commission work, then I have other parameters that I have to consider based on what the client's needs or wants are.
And so, because I feel like you do a lot of shows and like bigger art fairs and stuff, like how much of your and you're also, I mean, I feel like the thing that people that aren't artists forget is that you're also kind of running a business as an artist when you're a full-time artist. So
Yeah.
for your business, how much of that, like, I guess one question would be you're not dropping like an original on Instagram or like a collection and just like only doing web. Like you're mainly focusing on these galleries and art shows. And then um how much of that is supporting you versus like commissions and other type of work? Like are there other types of work that yeah, support your livelihood as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting balance. I think, I love doing gallery work. I think it's really beautiful to see all the work hang in a different space and see people's reactions and so on. So I definitely enjoy that process and do that. But truly, the commission work is something that I really value because it allows you to support your present day. Like a lot of gallery work is for a year and ahead and so on. So you are working towards your future in that capacity. But for the now, it's really commission work and also brand partnerships or collaborations in that capacity.
Mhm.
And that's really fun. Actually really love working on whether it's mural work or a product that I'm collaborating with a brand on or a collection in that capacity. It allows me to work with other creatives. It allows my work to have a different life beyond the painting or what I originally thought of it to be to live as. Like here I am making this painting, and all of a sudden it's either on clothing or a beverage or a surfboard or what have you. And that brings a lot of joy for me because it's, you have one visual and then all of a sudden people take it and run. And what that kind of work also allows a lot of people that maybe can't collect art. I think it's a small group of people that has the privilege to collect artwork, and I know it is a privilege. So in order to see people enjoying, a bag or beverage, a piece of clothing or what have you, beyond that space, is really exciting to see it out in the world. And that's something that I really feed on creatively, that
Mhm.
propels me forward. So I think as a maker, and I'm sure you feel this way too, you really have to diversify in this age your accessibility, and also what art form how your art is made and perceived and so on.
Like, as someone that didn't go to art school, I feel like I'm always navigating the line of, like, what if I did wanna go more fine art, like, what to put my energy into more, because I could make all my own products too, and, like, I've done brand collaborations, but, like, there's all these questions, like, should you do limited edition prints? Should you even do prints at all? Should you make reproductions of your work, or should you not reproduce it? And I feel like that the world can be, like, convoluted and, like, hard to understand almost. So I feel like it is just like my tactics just been like focus on my work and focus on myself and kind of like, keep my head down. But I am always interested to hear from other artists and like how they've navigated that.
It's a really, really difficult line. The fine art world, for the most part, is very particular on the collaborations you make. And I think moving forward, I'm going to have to be more and more um, picky and aware, and just be like, what does the blue chip art world, how do they feel about this association? Because you would never want to pigeonhole one way or other, or like limit the ability to progress in a gallery and institution way. But at the same time, my soul feeds off of working with other people, and I find the fun in making art is also seeing it interpreted in different ways. So I I think it's been really hard to say no to certain collaborations. I think it's been really difficult to find the right partnerships and what is acceptable, what isn't. And there isn't any rules, but everyone has opinions. And that's really hard to be in this space. And I'm sure you can relate to that, where you're like, well, I have to make a livelihood in the now. And brands are really the ones that are supporting artists in a wonderful capacity. But you have to be very selective on which brands you use, because the outside world is going to look in and be like, okay, she associates herself with X, Y, and Z. Does that align with me? And do I want to, work with her in a foundation or what, gallery or institution, and in this kind of traditional line of making art, which is very much the gallery and the paintings and they're hung in a certain capacity, or or am I going to put her in the commercial pocket and therefore she can't be in this camp? I think we're in this really
Hmm.
wild space, pre-internet and post-internet and social media and all this. Like, we are now our own gallerists, using, we have our portfolio online. We're letting people into our process, which has been an amazing tool. But it's where does the it's I think it's like I'm still figuring this like fine line out. I don't really
Hmm.
know. You follow your gut really and you hope it all works out, but it's a tough industry to be in, and to know what the right choices are. And you would hate to ever like put yourself in a corner, I guess, that you can't get out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All of that makes a lot of sense what you just said. And I feel like it is really confusing to navigate because yeah, you don't wanna just go full if you are navigating that line of, like, wanting to show in galleries and build collections, but also support yourself and collaborate with people because it is a cool way to, like, what better feeling than to have, like, your friend's friend be like, "I found your art in this store, like, on this product. That's so cool.
totally.
Now I'm wearing your backpack around," and, like, that's good marketing for, um, an artist as well, but then I have heard, like, I feel like on the fine art side, people be like, "Oh, that's too commercial." And so, like, what is the answer? I don't know if anyone really knows, but 'Cause I feel like your style would look good on both. Like, obviously, there's some like, look good in a fine art gallery and look good on a product. There's some art that, like, is so abstract where you're like, "That would probably never look good on a product,"
Right.
because it's literally like we're still trying to figure out what it means. It's a whole world to learn about.
Such a can of worms. It's like this clothing brand is acceptable, but this one isn't. This interior design brand is acceptable, but this one isn't. This, you know, like I don't know, this beverage is, but this one isn't because this one's associated with these people. You're like, oh my gosh, at what point do you just do what feels right and hope for the best?
Mhm,
And I try to continuously fulfill my own creative desires and needs while being very selective and still wary of like where I want to go.
mhm,
But yeah, I mean, I'm just, we're just out here trying.
mhm. Yeah. There's no rule book for, like, the social media age of being an artist and
There
everything
really
that's
isn't.
going on. Who do you feel like is making those decisions in that, like, about the brand, like, what's acceptable, what's not? If you were, like, to put a name, like, not a name on the person, but, like, I guess, like, the group of people.
I'm not sure. I mean, I would say like I've had a lot of talks with the gallerist that I work with closely, and she's wonderful, and she really, I've had a long standing relationship with her, and she's like, I am here to help you progress as best as possible. So she's been a wonderful advisor, and she's really sensitive to these things in a way that I maybe am less, but she's only pushing me forward so that my career can go in a way that then can support all the things, brand collaboration versus not, or like what our 5-year plan or 10-year plan is. And because I feel so often isolated in the making process, and I need that. I need to be alone to make. It's really good and really, I think for all artists to have people that you can touch with and be like, okay, what do we think? How do you feel? What is your opinion on my trajectory that maybe isn't a maker themselves, but in that world and can give like an outside view. So I don't know exactly, like I really value Polly's opinion because she's a gallerist and supports artists and so on, but she comes from a line of gallerists as well. And she also has such a pulse on the art world as a whole. And so that's really wonderful. And then I think it's also really important to have other creatives in different industries to give you touching points as well. So I don't know if I can necessarily answer that, but for me, it's been really valuable to be like, this is how I feel. What do you think about this? And they give you your opinions, and then you can kind of like find that middle ground of what you're comfortable with.
Having a mentor or somebody that you can run ideas by, especially when you're, like, day in and day out in your studio alone working, like, it can be really hard to have that big picture view when you're, like, this close to a painting all day long.
Mm,
Like, it can be hard to do
100%.
both. Like, how are you supposed to create all this work and have this massive plan of, like, that's to continue to propel you forward for success? So that's awesome that you found that and that you have that, um, support. There's so many gatekeepers, so having that access is really nice.
Totally. And there's an aspect of like decision paralysis that can happen. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but like it was a steep learning curve to become my own marketer, my manager, the painter, the art handler, the lawyer. I
Mm.
had to learn how to write contracts, because people love to take advantage of artists, which is so frustrating. And I think to have a strong like contract that people really respect as like a middle ground protector is really important. And it took years to learn all these different tools. Like you don't necessarily you learn craft in school, you learn the technique, you learn all this stuff, but you don't really learn what life presents you and these skill sets that you all of a sudden have to take on as a maker, as a one person team.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. It's a lot of hats to wear, and it's all learning by trial and error. Do you feel like because there's obviously like it sounds like there's kind of a direction where you know you wanna head, you have help from your mentor. Does that influence what you're creating now? like, because there's so many creative decisions to make within
Mm-hmm.
the creative process. Does that influence your work? And maybe in a good way, like it puts up guardrails.
Totally. So she she has basically said I need to even hone in more. Like I definitely feel like I have a style now, but she's like sh- for the next for the body of work that I'm making right now for 2025, for example, I need to really hone in on one style and make pieces that are variables of that just to establish a true visual understanding for a collector base. And then once the years of that have been established, then I can like spread my wings a little bit. But I do think I'm in this interesting place where I love to experiment with different backgrounds and colors and like play a little bit. But she's actually like, I'd like you to just hone in on this one visual interpretation of your work so we can like establish a rhythm there, and then you're able to spread your wings a little bit. And it's not something that I would naturally gravitate towards, but I think there's real value in that because basically you're creating a visual language that collectors can understand and expect from you. Not that you're repeating yourself necessarily, but that it feels cohesive with what they associate with you, so that then um, there's kind of a commonality. And so your work really is it's like, oh, there's a Velia De Iuliis, that is her work that I've established. I'd like to have her visual language on my wall. And then from that, you can progress. I think if you look at a lot of artists and their body of work throughout their lifetime, they've gone through so many seasons of interpretations of work and different experiments, but it's easy to forget that that happened over a lifetime. So yeah, it's an interesting place right now where I am.
Mhm.
I'm trying to hone in more before I go out.
Because it's like in terms of fine art, you're very young in your career. So it's really honing in on like exactly what your style is so that people can point to it and be like, oh, that's her.
Yeah. Yeah. Even more so, even though in my mind, it's all very familiar to me. So I'm like, well, of course it's my work, but obviously I'm not making it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, you're up this close to it every day. So kind of what is your plan or what are you excited about in the next in the future upcoming?
It's an interesting year for me because I'm very much in the studio again making work, but I'm so excited to see where these pieces end up and on what walls. I think the most exciting part of making paintings is seeing where they end up. And so I really feel I've had a lot of like big things happen this year. And so to be able to dedicate time just to being in the studio and developing and going back inward, I'm really excited for that. I am a very extrovert introvert, and I really very much mirrors my work practice. So like I do need the like murals and the collabs to feed off of human connection and environmental change to then just like close all the doors and be in my own space and not have anyone around. So I'm right now like been out and about and now I'm coming back in, and that's really exciting.
That's awesome. What were you working on in this last year that kind of like what murals and collaborations?
So last year I had a solo show here in LA, and I went to the Aspen Art Fair, and I also went to the Dallas Art Fair. So it was just like a ton of work for 2024, between 2023, 2024. Oh my gosh, no, excuse me, for 2023. We're in
Mhm.
2024. My goodness. And then in a couple weeks, I'm getting married. So it's been
Oh
like
my
a
gosh.
big life changes
That is
happening in the
big.
beginning of this year that have been. And then I just was at the Zona Maco in Mexico City, not for my own work, but just to see art. And that was so inspiring, and exciting. And I met with collectors and gallerists and so on. So yeah, I think it's so important to go out and touch base with seeing different kinds of art, different backgrounds, different cultures, and so on. To then I like love coming back in and feeding.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's this year is going to be. I'm curious to see how this, big life change and getting married and so on feeds into my art. I've never been in that space, so yeah, it's been
Yeah.
great.
Good. Well, that's so exciting. Where are you getting
Thank
married?
you. In Colorado,
Nice.
in
Are
the
you
snow, and we are doing a micro wedding, so we have 12 guests.
Oh, I love
And
that. So
we both love
simple.
to ski and like be in the outdoors. So we're like, why not go to a place where we can cross country ski or snowshoe or make a campfire surrounded by snow and be in a cabin and just hang out and be in nature. It's going to be fun and exciting.
That's awesome. And Colorado's had a good snow year compared to I'm in Washington, and like literally you can't really ski at our mountain right now. It's pretty sad.
I know, I think like Europe's been really bad too. It's an interesting, we've been hit pretty good, California,
Yeah.
but yeah, I know it's snowing right now there. It's like 2 degrees currently. So
In
we'll
Colorado.
see. Yeah.
Burr. That'll be cold.
Burr, I know.
No, that'll be
Long
fun.
John's under the dress, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Are you gonna do like a ski boot, like ski or like ride the lifts up to get married, or is it gonna be indoor?
No, well, we're a little bit further away from a ski resort, but I do think I'll be in snowshoes or cross country skis. I think that'll be the move.
Yes, so fun. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, I hope that all goes smoothly. It's gonna be amazing. And what an exciting year ahead that you have to like that's also probably a big shift and you're gonna be around all the people that love you. So it'll be nice to get in the studio and just have that solo time to like focus
Yeah,
on
no matter,
everything.
I think the takeaway is like no matter how small you make the wedding, it's still such a big event that it's take in the best way possible, it takes a lot of energy.
Hmm.
And for someone that like really, really needs her like inner time and her creative time, it's been a lot going out towards that. And it's wonderful, don't get me wrong, but I'm excited to kind of pull that back in and use that as fuel to come back to the studio.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I can imagine I mean, just any event like that always takes a lot. So that's
Hmm.
exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, very last question. What advice would you give to your past self, maybe like right when you graduated college?
Oh my gosh. I still have these tendencies, but I'm a huge overthinker. And so I felt like that mind block very much held me back a long time before I just let go and was like, screw it, go for it. So I think not to be so self-critical or like so in your own world of doubt, just to like breathe and let go. And I think past self Velia had a lot of life to live. And so um yeah, I think I relaxed into my own body in my later 20s before hitting 30, and that was a really exciting chapter because I did just relinquish and just went for it to see, like threw a bunch of stuff on the wall and saw what stuck. Um,
Hmm.
and I really value that time. But yeah, younger self just all is gonna be well. Like it's
Yeah,
gonna be okay. The world
just
is
chill.
big, but like
Yeah.
just chill.
That's really good advice. I'm also a huge overthinker. I'm turning 30 this year and terrified. Um,
Congratulations. It's
Thanks,
really
but
fun.
it's only gonna get better from here.
The 30s are great. Like I love being in my 30s. It's a really fun time. You feel a lot of people around you have like really settled into their own skin. And
Mhm.
even if there's crazy transition and really lots of unknowns, there's a different like level of calm and security knowing your own person in a different way
Mhm.
that I felt like in my 20s it came from like the 20s it came from up here and I was like like a lot of like anxiety up there like of the unknown, and then the 30 it's like in the gut you're like
Okay, you're more
I don't know if
stable,
that
you're
makes
more
sense.
grounded. No, that
Yeah,
totally makes sense. Well, okay, I'm gonna
at
remember
least I
that.
hope that's how it turns out.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. I'm just
I swear
slightly
it's gonna be
panicking.
great.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for chatting today. It was really inspiring. Just everything you've done in your career thus far. I'm excited to follow along and see where it all takes you. And congratulations. And I'm hoping to see some wedding pics online.
I will. I know we've
Okay.
been holding back. Well, you know, they'll be out there.
They'll be out there.
Gianna, it was so lovely speaking with you. Thank you for having me on your program.
Definitely. Yes. Thank you. I will see you hopefully next time.
Absolutely. Have a good
Okay.
one.
Bye.
Bye.